one of the things I wanted to start out with, we wanted to talk a little bit about nitrogen. But before I get into that, I wanted to talk just a minute about some of the things that we saw this year. And of course, a year ago it was a great start, and about now is when everything just kind of started to crash, and we ran out of moisture. We had everything going for us, had a perfect crop. This year it turned right around. Last year my brother works for CGB. He says we were dredging all the rocks out of the river, and a guy yesterday at a meeting said, yeah, we gave one of the rocks to the governor, to kind of symbolize how we needed to work on our infrastructure for grain movement. And of course, he said, boy, that was a bad idea. Look at the water we've had this year. So it's really changed. And I think about, the stresses we had last year, which really just involved, we had a great crop. Population was the only limiting factor other than when we threw moisture in. But we still saw a number of great things. And I'll kind of go through those. But to start with this year, a couple of them that, really come to mind is as we were applying products to the plots, and we've got a hormone that we started using this year, and both trials where we put out that hormone, huge, tremendous growth, and you'll get a chance to view that. Not sure what it's going to do, if it's going to end up in more yield, but it sure was exciting. Got some corn plants I wanted to start out with, and I got my human crane. He's a big guy, not too bad. So this one is a little bit shorter, but it's got a pretty darn good ear on it. This next one, a little bit taller, not a bad ear, but not quite as significant. And then this guy, he's even taller yet. And then lastly, we've got one that's just kind of getting going. It looks like it's kind of a slow starter, right? What do you think's going on? What is this? Anybody got a guess? So what Mark is holding in his left hand is our first planting date. Same hybrid. You'll see it over there as you pass around. April 6th. We got in on a Saturday. Yeah, we worked a little overtime and got our corn planted. And look how short it is. Same hybrid planted May 1st. Next time we can really get in and work because the rainfall. Still a good quality ear, but the stalk size starts to diminish. She gets a little short, narrower stalk, and not quite as good an ear, but much taller. And then it even gets worse. And this last one, she was starting up until the last couple weeks, run out of moisture, so it's going to be a little shorter. Last year's crop was tremendous. Our corn, the very first planting last year, biggest yield. I fully expect that to be the same case this year again. But we're going to have a lot better opportunity for the last two planting dates. And so we've got a May 1st, a May 15th, and a June 6th. So we've got 2 months between the first and last planting. And had I had more opportunity, because we had growers in our area that couldn't get in until June 15th or June 30th, so it'd be interesting to see. We did plant some corn 3 years ago for a plot out here that you'll see some that's about knee high. We planted July 15th 3 years ago. It's 120 bushel when we harvested. It's still wet, but it was 120 bushels. So there's some hope for some of this late planted corn. And but I guess one of the key features is that I think about when we look at this is which one of these is going to be the problem the first windstorm comes along. As you get later, it's more willowy. She's had to grow fast, not get near the nutrition in each cell, and it's going to be much tougher to have standability. And you guys know what standability is when it comes to harvest. It's bad news. It's bad news. It slows you down. Production loss, the corn itself, the way it's deep on the ground, but it really folds back into the profit as well. So I'm kind of looking at these two and saying, for sure, I want some standability, and the only way that I can really accomplish that today is in my opinion, fungicide. So that's kind of a quick note as to where we're at. This is all right next door to each other, same nutritional plan. As you look, you'll see that first stalk built itself. It's a darker green. It looks better to me than the rest. And I think you'll see some of the same things. So as you're viewing your own fields, I think you'll start to see, well, boy, that hybrid's a lot taller. And, you know, it may associate itself back to planting date just as much as anything else as far as standability and what you're experiencing. So I'd almost say one of the nutrients that we really got to be looking for, and this is the second year in a row, so we had a real dry year and now a pretty darn wet year, starting about April 6th, April 10th, started to get wet. We're really seeing sulfur come floating to the top as one of the nutrients that is making some visual differences. We'll have some data, of course, this fall, and kind of looking forward to that. So as you think through what it is that you saw and flashes of beans and what's going on, I think part of it is associated to this sulfur. And why sulfur? Why would we see sulfur be so deficient this year? I think part of it comes back to what's gone on. The moisture flushes that, just like nitrogen, down deeper into the profile. It's not up at the top anymore. It comes from either the atmosphere, rains in, or it mineralizes in most cases out of our organic matter. That's where we get our sulfur. And we're starting to run a little short on sulfur. The Clean Air Act has done its job. It's cleaned up the air. It's done its job, especially in our area. If we were maybe a little bit east of Chicago, some of the bigger cities where they're still running a lot of autos and you know, they could still have some decent sulfur counts. We went through and set this trial up, and I tried to pick a hybrid that would be very sensitive to nitrogen. You know, you're doing a nitrogen study and you're trying to do something visual. You want it to be a hybrid that responds to nitrogen pretty darn good, in my opinion. So we started out with 100 units of nitrogen, went to 200 units of nitrogen, and back to 100. And this is 8th year corn on corn in this block, and it's a damp block. We just finally got tile in last year. Yeah, driest year in the, you know, on record almost. We got our tile in, but it did its job this year. We still had a little bit of ponding out here, but we didn't lose it. This, a lot of times, it's a big old duck pond. Can't really get anything out, a little bit on the edges. But you'll start to see every 4 rows we went to a different rate of N, 100 units, and then back to 0. And it follows its way through, and we did change hybrids as we went to the other end, kind of take a look at something different, and we'll take this out and yield. But I guess I kind of think through this thing as, so what are we really saying here? That 100 units of N or 200 units or 0 is the right rate? No. This is a demonstration to think about what's going on with nitrogen. We've had years, not this year, but we've had years where the rate of N didn't make much difference. You could go to 0 rate and it was still dark green. As you can see, this is not dark green. And I think about it from the 2030, you just heard, we got to double our corn crop by 2030, right? Double our production. Can't do it at 0 rate of N, right? 100 units of N, probably not. 200 units, getting close. My best yield average here is 210 average over all the hybrids, all the trials, but that's with a good fertility program to take advantage of making that nitrogen more efficient, just as efficient as I can get it. And the population cranking it just to the right pop to take advantage of that nutrition, you know? Planting date, that's part of it. But we also created the perfect storm last year. Had no moisture. Didn't raise much of a corn crop. We put on nitrogen for decent corn. Didn't go into the crop. Didn't pull it off. Where did it go? We put it on some more last fall, preparing for this year. In some cases we turned it down, in some cases we left it the same because we really didn't know. But we took on a nitrogen testing program, and we kind of saw this coming, the perfect storm. Perfect storm of drought, high nitrates in our soils from corn on corn, and not sure about everything else, but we got the rain started first week of April in this area, and it's continued. Our water has had higher nitrates levels in our lakes and streams than what we've had in the past. So you guys have a really tough job. You guys, we're going to help you. That's what this is all about. We're trying to help you. But you got to produce more corn and minimize the amount of nutrition going into lakes and streams, because the EPA is starting to get sued. And we've talked about this the last couple of years, and I guess as I start thinking through, so what is it can we convey today about what the right rate of N and how to accomplish it and meet the needs of the corn crop as it continues to expand? What do we need to do? Part of it is we need to go back and really look at these 4 R's. Remember the 4 R's? Has anybody got to guess what the first one is? The right source. The right timing, the right rate, and the right placement. The 4 R's. Good basics, good solid basics. So where in there did it say what rate is really the right rate, or what the right timing is, or what the? That's what I struggle with, and you guys I know do. And we each year, we've got plants in different soils and different areas. In each one of you, there is no one right rate of N for the state of Illinois, right? It's also not the right rate for each field. It's within each field, and probably the product selection falls back to, as you run into sands, it's more side dress. It's the ability to hold that soil. As you run in down here, it's going to be trying to manage what doesn't denitrify. Put in some tile. So how much of the nitrogen that was left over last year and went down the creek this year is from fall applied? So the next thing is when a lot of, after these nitrate tests, you take them at a profile. If this is the soil surface and you've got a 1 foot and a 2 foot area, typically what we've always seen is this foot up here is about as good as anything. You can just about get all the data of nitrates and everything that you want right in that top foot. This second foot is where all the nitrates move to. They didn't leave. A lot of our ammonia converted, eventually stayed in the soil, and it was there. And that's why a lot of this crop is starting to really heal itself up. This obviously is not going to heal itself up at 0 rate because it didn't have it. It might move a little bit, but we're finally starting to get down there, and that's why a lot of this corn started out looking a little bit peaked, with sulfur deficiency, low N, because all this nitrate moved down deeper. And that's part of the sampling process. If you are going to take some soil samples for nitrates, 1 foot isn't going to accomplish it. We had a lot of people up in northern Illinois that were starting to pull some samples, and they were just doing 1 foot. And so by putting in tile, are we creating more problems or minimizing problems? We put tile in here because, hey, we wanted a little crop. You guys, you've got some wet spots, you need to be able to farm it, but are we creating more problem or minimizing? I was in a meeting yesterday with Bob Haft. Bob, University of Illinois for a lot of years, a lot of knowledge, a lot of data behind him, and he's indicating that a big percentage of our nitrogen loss is through denitrification. Denitrification is all about that nitrogen converting and moving into a form where it's a gas. It's too wet. Where's the N2 gas go? It goes up back in where we got it. We take nitrogen into gas through ammonia production facilities. They bring it back down, put it into add hydrocarbons, and we put it in the soil, but it eventually goes right back up. And so it's the two wet soils, and so every time I see tile going in, I'm not as concerned about that creating more nitrates going into our water. It'll attribute itself, but it's really back to, as long as those are put in deep enough to minimize that water down deep. We're not trying to take care of the surface water. We're trying to take care of water deep in the soil. Okay. So thinking about that, so we got the 4 R's. So what's the right product? Well, the right product in these soils, what we've seen the best response out of, and it's kind of a guide that we've tried to put together after trial and error here with a number of different trials, is to split our nitrogen application. Put on part of it in the fall, part of it in the spring at the minimum. Split it at least twice. A lot of times we'll put on 2 apps in the fall. You know, you've got a little bit of nitrogen that comes in with your DAP or phosphate. You know, every time you put phosphate on, you've typically got some nitrogen there, and that we can add into the calculation. These plots behind us, 9 through 12, are all 4 different rates of total N, and we calculate out and subtract out the suspension in the fall and the 28 in the spring. And it's always ended up being like, say, when we add all those together, about 210 is giving me most hybrids my best yields. But I typically will try and split that 3 times. I'll try and put it on suspension as soon as we harvest, plow that in, P&K, get it plowed in, put on my ammonia after the soil temperatures, which is the timing, after the soils have cooled and we've got insert with it, and then thirdly, 28. Why do we need that 28? And why does it make a big difference in our yields? Because of this reaction right here, where the nitrogen's moving down deeper, and it's not there for the little corn plant, those little roots. You know, up until that corn gets knee high, it doesn't have roots that can get to it, and the nitrogen may be going deeper, it might be coming up. It's going to follow the water table, and it's going to really move with it. On dry years, it's going to move to the surface, but it doesn't have any moisture to bring it into the crop. That's what happened last year. This year, it moved it deeper. So that's why we need a little bit of 28 in the spring. What's the other reason we need a little 28 in the spring and corn on corn? Residue. Immobilization. So we're going to immobilize. So if we got this trash on the surface up here from last year's corn crop, this is 8th year corn, that's going to immobilize. So if we did have some nitrate up there, residue sucking it up. What was really cool with the nitrate test last year that I sent out is wherever we had no-till, the nitrate tests were higher. Wherever we had tillage, we folded that residue into the soil. The amount of nitrate in that top foot was reduced. It had actually started accomplishing that. We'd sampled that about the last week in October, if I remember correctly. This is when I took my nitrate samples last fall. So residue can also be part of the answer for this nitrate going downstream, but it can also be a real problem as far as getting those little corn plants, and that's why we need to split this up, be more efficient. You don't have to turn it up as much, so you can minimize that, okay? So we've got the type of product. If I were on sandy soils, I'd want to move more towards 28% or something that I can feed a little bit at a time through the crop year. That's going to be the most efficient because I can't hold that soil, nitrogen in that soil, right? So each of you got a real quiz to handle. Secondly, then, so we've got source, the timing, and now rate, 210. That's kind of what I'm seeing. So what's the right rate? What's the right rate? And is it like population? I just heard Glenn talk about population and how influencing population is. Is one rate the right rate? So we've got fields here, and this is a board from 5 years ago that we put together. And I brought it back out just for one little demonstration. This is a high yield area. This is what we've kind of determined as lower yield. And the high yield, we know through watching what's going on in the data as we've collected hundreds of thousands of acres of yield information and layer that with soils, layer it with fertility, you automatically come to the conclusion, holy cow, there's places out here we don't need any in. We don't know it exactly where they are, but there's places we need a lot in. So each part of the field is the right in rate is different as we go across. Just like the population, the right population as we go across. One thing that Gwen brought up, and I was listening, I don't listen very often, but I did to Gwen, and she's all about trying to get you guys more yield, and that's really important for this, 2030, double the yield. But it also, what else does it do? When you've got extra in being produced by the soil, because you've got those hot spots out there, what do you need? You need more population. You need something to suck that up, don't you? You're saving the water quality by using variable pop. So in the future, this is not, you got a two-sided job here. You got to try and make some money, produce high yields, and minimize the impact on water quality. Cover crops will be a part of that. You'll get an opportunity to listen in. And Mike has some great information on cover crops and how they work and how to get started if you're interested. So one of the things that BRANDT learned quite some time ago was the interaction between population and mineralization throughout a field had heavy impact in potentially your outcome of your yield. We've typically, when we variable pop the last years that I've been here, we're in that somewhere between 5 and 12 bushel range, depending on the field, depending on the year. A year like last year. So out here where I've got very good soil test level P&Ks, and then we added some P&K, what was the right population out here when I've got 20-inch rows versus 30-inch rows? What do you think the pop that averaged out the best? Dry year. 42,000. 42,000 plants per acre. And I'm like, wow, never would have guessed it. That's why you run some of these trials. 20s had a little bit of an advantage, and so this year we've actually taken 20-inch row corn, and all this the last 4 years we've run different rates of N. We pick a hybrid, we'll pick a block, we'll run different rates of N, 4 different rates of N, a couple different populations, with and without phosphorus and potash, and we watch how that hybrid works with all those nutritional programs back and forth. And now we've got it with 20-inch rows, which I'm really excited about looking through and kind of seeing. So is that going to be similar to 30-inch rows, or is there going to be some movement, some change? This would be it's an ongoing project for us, but I believe we're going to go to higher population to get higher yields. We're going to need to narrow our corn row up some. So one of the things Gwen talked about, and we've been an advocate of, and variable population and hybrid placement, we've seen these differences between hybrids. And so we've come up with and had out a program that by phenotype, by the type of hybrid, kind of know that it's going to respond a little bit better to nitrogen or phosphate, potash, population, how it's going to interact and give us a little better placement by how you farm, by what's going to go on. We've got that automated. It works very well. We start that out, and we kind of color coded it because we're simple. We understand. I'm not colorblind, thank goodness. But it really does make a difference. And we started seeing things 2 and 3 years ago in these blocks. 9 through 12 was the yellow hybrid, that really responded well to low rates of N, but didn't respond a lot to P&K applications, the rate of P&K. And then we had some hybrids that were very responsive, 20 bushel per acre. But we categorize them just to make it simple for ourselves, because it starts getting a little messy. So you got the 4 R's, and as you start working down through, okay, so what's the right rate, and what's the right hybrid now, and what's the right, it starts to get pretty complicated. And so we're trying to simplify it as best we could. But we started seeing these differences and started thinking, There's more to it, and these are going to continue to change, but these categories are going to be the same. They're still going to work. Okay? In the same respect, like I say, we had data that looks at the population and how each hybrid really responded to population. I think she's on to something, you know? I think if she watches clinics on a paper once more, she'll figure out she's right. Population by hybrid and choosing that is going to pay. And some hybrids it isn't. Planting date's going to make some difference. How you manage your farm is going to be a little different. How much nitrogen you throw at it, you're going to go, oh, I'm not putting nitrogen on again because that stuff went down. Was that the hybrid's fault, or was it the total management? And that's kind of one of the keys. What we came up with is what we call our total acre system. Total acre really takes a look at hybrid placement, electronically places it and tries to pick out some that really work well on that field, soil type, fertility, management. Then secondly, it places population in higher and lower mineralization areas where we're going to get. And then thirdly, it'll apply fertility a little differently. Not with the standard practice, trying to build the soil to a certain percentage, but it'll go back. And then fourthly, it'll, the total acre is really about taking advantage of micronutrients, sulfur, zinc, and really trying to use those as hormones to incentivize the plant to accomplish what it needs to for better roots, better stalks. Standability is important, growth, early growth. Minimize the stresses that we put on it from herbicides and weed killing. You're going to listen to Dr. Aaron Hager that is going to go through. We're going to place a lot more stress on these plants in the future than we are now. And it's really about trying to assist that corn plant through a stressful time period. This ear, it's a mother. That mother is creating that ear. She's going through a lot of changes. It's really starting to suck everything out of the soil that it can get a hold of, out of its stalk, that bigger, girthier stalk. To fill that ear, fill every kernel, it needs as much sunlight. So what's slowing down our growth and kernel fill is going to be lack of sunshine, cooler temperatures. That's what our concern is today. But we need to standability. If we've got nutritional spots in our fields, if we were in 100 bushel corn, 200 bushel corn, 300 bushel corn out in our fields and spots, it's going to take and assist those lower nutritional areas. That's what we've seen, we've documented. Every time we put on fungicide, back in 2007, when they put a fungicide application on, it took the nitrate levels, and instead of the tissue test continue to drop, it flattened it out. It also did it with potassium. Potassium's already up in the corn plant by then, so it's the efficiency of that movement of that product. Last year we saw how the influence of P and K, and this is probably the last part of the nitrogen, is how do we make it even better. So we've got the 4 R's. We know that we've got variable in our field. We need to probably be variable rating our population and nutrition, matching it up, taking advantage of the spots that are nutritionally deficient and are putting out more. This was P and K applied last year and how it just affected the early tasseling versus later tasseling and how it responded. The nitrogen, P and K are huge in the corn plant's ability to use nitrogen and get by with less. In mechanisms that it does in nutrient removal. So, questions, thoughts of what you've seen this year, and how'd your nitrogen program? What would be the number one thing if you had a do-over? What would be the number one thing that you would say I want to do over if I could? Knowing now, looking back, what kind of weather I had, what would be your number one do-over?
Plant early.
Huh? Plant early. You darn right. All right. I've heard that. I've gotten scolded by our local sales team that I plant too early around here, and then finally this is about the third or fourth year where they, they said, you know what, we're going to quit arguing with you. We're just going to plant early. It's worked out. Frost can be an issue, obviously. I escaped it last year. I know some of you locally didn't, and but plant earlier is huge. Nitrogen, if I had a do-over field, if I had a field look like this, I'd want to put some side dress in on it. I probably would have, But as I look back through and watch the mineralization, so how much in does mineralization assist with our corn crop? 200 bushel corn crop. How much in are we applying for that crop, and how much is coming from the soil in general? What's that?
80 units in out of the ground.
Pretty easy. You're exactly. A good normal would be 80 units. And there are years and there are spots in the field where it's 300 units. It's amazing. It's amazing what the soil can do, but it's going to take some air. It's going to take some mineralization. Organic matter has to be down there. Things have to happen, right? We can't shut the system down and start it back up. It can't be too dry. It's kind of the one thing about mineralization is it's on a bell curve. Sorry for my marker, but we've got this the highest spot of mineralization over here on this chart. The high spot is at kind of nice moisture. We've got some moisture, but it's not flooded. If it's flooded, it drowns it out. You guys have had engines, diesel engines. You flood them out, they don't pull too good. You get just the right air to fuel mixture, they just run. My truck, it's computerized. It's computerized. The transmission's computerized. It acts according to how I drive, they tell me. I don't know if it does. The engine goes from 4 to 8 cylinders, and it's trying to adjust to how I drive. That's where we need to head with our nutrient programs. We need something that adjusts as we drive, as we manage, because every one of us manages a little different. We've got good reasons for it, whether it's economics, soils, just our own ability and how we want to farm, how much roll you've got to the ground. So it's all about, we needed technology to move us forward. Up until this truck came, I was really happy with my old truck. Really happy. Step on the fuel, take off, and it started out when I first drove it, the first tank of gas, 8 miles per gallon.